When I woke up this morning, I was praying with my homily and reading it over for today. I was reminded of a priest, Father John Ricardo. He was one of the speakers of the Upper Room Conference, and his advice to preachers was, if you don't feel that your homily is a message from God, then you should just go straight from the gospel to the creed. So simply put, if you don't actually feel like what you have is a message from God to his people, you shouldn't even give a homily. And so I was praying with my homily, and I really felt that the Lord's just saying, well, he didn't say just go straight to the creed. So I allowed him to kind of challenge me this morning, and I just wanted to share something more from the heart about today's gospel. It's I just love today's gospel. It's such a powerful message from Jesus, in that Jesus is asked this great skill testing question. You know, there's 613 laws in the Bible at that time, and Jesus is asked, what's the best one? You know, it's like if I was to hold up a Bible and I was to say, okay, summarize this entire Bible in just one sentence, what would you say? It's like you're stuck in an elevator with someone and they say, okay, summarize Christianity. You got 20 seconds. Tell me what you got. I was even thinking, Archbishop Miller, imagine if before I was ordained, he's like, okay, Deacon Richard, before I ordain you a priest, what's the most important thing you learned in all of seminary? And so it's a great question that Jesus is asked, and he gives an answer that no one at the time had ever given before. He combined two commandments into one. And so Jesus gave the first commandment, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind. And all the Jews of the time, they would have agreed. They would have thumbs up. I totally agree. That was something that they often said. They would say this every single day. But then immediately Jesus adds a second command, which is something that was never done before. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so the Jews, I think at this time, they would have been able to understand kind of what Jesus was trying to get at. In one perspective, the 10 Commandments, an easy way to divide the 10 Commandments is you have the first 3, which deal with love of God, and then the next 7, the last 7, deal with love of neighbor. So they would have been able to kind of understand what Jesus is saying. They could also take it from the perspective of being made in the image and likeness of God. Okay, so we're called to love God directly, totally, and then we're also called to love those who have been made in God's image and likeness, indirectly. So we can love God totally in himself and in those who have been made in his image and likeness. So they would have been able to understand that as another way that Jesus was trying to get at this idea of love of God and love of neighbor. And I was even thinking, I have a brother with two girls, and, I can love my brother directly in himself, or I can show love for my brother by loving his 2 daughters. So we understand it even on a human level, this connection between love of God and love of neighbor. It kind of makes sense. But I still feel like this idea, for me personally, if I could love God directly or love him indirectly through others, it kind of gives me an excuse. Like, I'm consecrated to God, so I like spending time with God, and it kind of gives me an excuse not to really spend time with other people. I'll just focus on loving God, and I think that's good enough. But I really felt Jesus challenging me today when I was praying with this reading, in that what's life-changing about Jesus Christ, no one else, okay? He's totally unique. He's the only person who is fully God and fully man. In the person of Jesus Christ, God and humanity came together. This was unheard of. And so Jesus, in the person of Jesus Christ, God and humanity became one. And when I think about this in today's gospel, Jesus is saying it's absolutely impossible to love God unless you love your neighbor. It's absolutely impossible to love God unless you love your neighbor, because that's what God did in the person of Jesus Christ. He became one of us. He became our neighbor. And when you think of Jesus, it should be one of the most life-changing statements we've ever heard, is that Jesus says your eternal salvation will be dependent upon love of neighbor. Have we ever actually taken these words to heart? Is that Jesus, he says, at the final judgment, what is the criteria upon whether you go to heaven or hell? Jesus says, what you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. He makes love of neighbor the criteria of whether we go to heaven or hell. And I don't think I've ever really taken these words seriously, that these 5 words, you did it to me. St. Paul was one who got to experience this because Paul was persecuting Christians. And then one day he got knocked off his horse, and Jesus said, Paul, Paul, why are you persecuting me? That must have just radically changed Paul's entire life to realize that what he was doing to others, Jesus says, you do it to me. I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever taken these words seriously. That how I treat my neighbor is literally how I treat God himself. I think back on my brother's situation with his 2 daughters. Imagine if it was like anything done to my brother's daughters, I do directly to him. If my brother says, how you treat my 2 daughters, that's exactly how you treat me. And sometimes parents can get an experience of this. Parents love their children so much that the pains and joys that their children experience, parents feel it. I know with my mom, when I was going through a really tough time in golf, it was almost too difficult for my mom to go and watch me play golf, because I was going through such a difficult time that my mom really felt it. And so parents get to experience this, but it's even more on a way higher level with God. Every single one of us, for God, we are his children, and what we go through, God experiences that. He's our Father. These words should challenge us that you did it to me. These five words. Like Mother Teresa, if she was in the elevator with you and you gave her a Bible, and she said, Mother Teresa, what's the Bible in one sentence? She had her 5-finger gospel. And this can be a beautiful thing for us to take away. She said that the entire gospel is summarized in 5 fingers. You did it to me. That was her entire life, was living out the 5-finger gospel. Imagine if every time we looked at our hand, we reminded ourselves of this and actually lived it out. That how I treat you is, in a way, how I treat Jesus. That Jesus receives everything that I do to you as personally done to him. This can change our entire perspective of life. It's like imagine, we go and get eye surgery to see clearly. Well, if we were to be given eye surgery from Jesus on a spiritual level, and we could actually see clearly, we could actually see Jesus in other people, to know when you look at the family dinner table, that when you look across and you see your family members, Jesus is saying, what you do to your family members, you're doing to me. For me, I rarely ever think about this, but I want these words to challenge me and to change my life. And when I think about Mother Teresa, like this 5-finger gospel, she makes it so simple. This is one of my favorite quotes from her. On a practical level, just smiling at each other. This is what she says: "Let us always meet each other with a smile, for smile is the beginning of love. Every time you smile at someone, it's an action of love, a gift to that person, a beautiful thing. We shall never know the good that a simple smile can do." During these times of COVID, we should smile so much you can see it through your mask. You could bring new life and love to someone else just by a simple smile. To know that Jesus is actually receiving that smile as if you're doing it to him. It can be so simple, but it's the start of a beautiful act of love. And same thing with the words that we speak have so much power. The words that we speak have so much power. You did it to me. Recently, a couple months ago, I was having a really rough day, and I had a friend, a former seminarian, who sent me a text message, and he says, "I've been listening to your homilies over the last couple months," and then he went on to share how much of an impact it had made for him, this one thing that I said. That was like a game changer for my day. It brought so much joy, and it changed my day from just feeling down in the dumps to really feeling encouraged that I could keep going forward. You never know how much power words can have. A simple text message or a simple phone call during these times. There are so many people out there who are lonely and in desperate need of a word of encouragement, a word of hope, a word of love. So these little things, the power of a smile, the power of a text message or a phone call, can be life-changing for someone in this time. The 5-finger gospel, you did it to me. And when I think back upon my brother's situation with his 2 daughters, if I love his daughters well, that brings great joy to my brother's heart. Really, when I think about how the best way I could possibly love my brother is by loving his 2 daughters. And if he sees me love them well, that brings joy to his heart. All of us have the opportunity today to bring joy to God's heart by loving our neighbor well. Just think about that. You have an opportunity to bring joy to the God of the universe by loving your neighbor well. When I say at the end of Mass, "Go forth, the Mass is ended," it's not to say Mass is over and you can go back to normal life. No, it's I'm sending you out as missionaries of charity to bring the love of God to so many people that are in desperate need of your love, of your smile, of your words of encouragement. So keep this in mind, the 5-finger gospel, you did it to me. And when I say go forth, the Mass is ended, let's go and bring the love of God to those who most need it.